On July the 22nd, 1942, the first doomed transports left the Warsaw Ghetto, their cattle carts hurtling towards the nightmare of Treblinka, with those inside having no idea of what awaited them. Warsaw, which hosted the largest Jewish ghetto during the Second World War, had roughly 350,000 inhabitants by the time that the first quote-unquote relocations east began. Samuel Rajchman, who was sent to Treblinka in the September of 1942, spoke of how placards were dispersed throughout the Warsaw Ghetto in the months preceding the first deportations. Such placards explained that Jews who were currently unemployed would be subject to immediate deportation. Fearing the worst, many Warsaw Ghetto Jews would pay local employers as much as 1,000 to 4,000 zloty to secure them a job working at a German firm, as a means to escape such roundups. Before the first deportations began, and rumours began to leak around the ghettos of the general government, the vast majority of the Jews destined for Treblinka had little idea of what truly awaited them. One man who likely did understand what awaited his kin in these little village camps was Adam Czerniaków. Czerniaków, a figure whose actions still spark a really interesting ethical debate today, was the Judenrat head of the Warsaw Ghetto. The Judenrat was a small Jewish body that was granted limited power over their respective ghetto. Somewhat like a mock senate, this group of Jews, specifically selected by the SS, were to oversee administrative roles and communicate information with both the inhabitants of the ghetto and their SS overseers. As head of the Judenrat in Warsaw, Czerniaków would thus be privy to information that other Jews, even those on his committee, would not be. SS Sturmbannführer Höfler, who oversaw Gross Action Warsaw, the code name for the mass deportations of Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto to the Treblinka extermination camp, told Czerniaków that 6,000 Jews were to be deported each day from the ghetto, starting at 4 p.m. On any one day, a group of roughly 6,000 Jews were to be rounded up, taken to the holding pens, and later forced to board the trains to await relocation east, as many were told. Gross Action Warsaw was to be initiated on July the 22nd, 1942. Czerniaków, who realized that deportation was almost certainly equivalent with death, attempted during his last hours to plead with the SS to grant orphan Jewish children exemption from deportations. Unsurprisingly, his pleas went unheard, and, unable to cope with the guilt of helping to organize the destruction of his own people, Czerniaków committed suicide on July the 23rd, 1942, a day after Gross Action Warsaw began. In his suicide note, Czerniaków noted, "They demand me to kill children of my own nation with my own hands. I have nothing to do but to die." Czerniaków's suicide sent shockwaves throughout the Warsaw Ghetto, with Rajchman saying that many people knew that this was likely to be linked with the temporally parallel deportations. Those inside the ghetto, who were under no illusion of their place in the Third Reich, rationally feared the worst. While many likely didn't picture something quite as abhorrent as Treblinka, the possibility of estrangement from their family or relocation to a forced labour camp was enough for most to want to evade deportation. If they could not afford to buy a job, many would hide or attempt to smuggle themselves out of the ghetto. To combat this, the SS would conduct combing raids across sections of a ghetto. A street or group of streets would be cordoned off, and armed SS men would be sent in to comb through the houses and uproot hiding Jews. Other than force, the SS also used deception and temptation to lure the Jews into deportation. Extra travel rations were promised to anyone who volunteered themselves to be deported, and were given extra bread and extra jam. Given the starvation crisis that plagued the Warsaw Ghetto, it was an attractive prospect to its emaciated population, like a Venus flytrap releasing a sweet scent, luring an insect to its doom. Once a large enough group was assembled, they would then be taken to the railway station platform at around 4 p.m. to await boarding. Records from the Karl Strebel trial detailed the following about such boarding processes. At the railway station, the Jews were made to sit down. When the freight cars were ready, embarkation began. Usually, the number of Jews exceeded the regular capacity of the cars. The Jews would then be pushed in by force. Up to 150 people could then be crammed into one single freight car. Once a deportation action had been completed, the freight cars would be locked, a signal given, and the train would then begin to pull those trapped inside to their final destination, Treblinka. Despite a theoretically short journey from Warsaw to Treblinka, the depraved conditions ensured that lots of those who boarded the cattle carts never got off. Although the journey offered a reprieve for small numbers of young men who managed to break out of their transports mid-journey, for most it was prolonged torture. Abraham Goldfarb testified. The cars were then closed from the outside with boards. Water and food were not provided. People suffocated. There was very little air to breathe. Before we moved off, the Germans sprinkled chlorine in the cars, which burned the eyes. The weaker among us fainted. During the 2-day trip to Treblinka, 135 people in our carts suffocated. Such conditions were exacerbated due to heavy delays in disembarkation to the camp, thanks to a backlog of unprocessed transports, born from Imfred Ebel's incompetence. Ebel, the first commandant of Treblinka, and a man who will be discussed later on, had greatly overestimated the number of transports his staff could deal with during the first weeks and months of Treblinka's operation. As a result, a train journey that should have taken a matter of hours could now last as long as a whole day, if not longer. Transports would regularly be left outside the camp, mere minutes from their destination, waiting for their turn to be processed. As the SS and Ukrainian guards at Treblinka refused to admit Jews at night time, transports could arrive at the Treblinka village station at, say, 7 p.m, to only be held overnight, waiting anxiously in their carts for processing in the morning. The security guard escorts that accompanied the trains, who were primarily there to prevent escape attempts, which is another topic that I'll be looking at later, would often frequent the transports during these overnight periods, demanding any valuables from the Jews before their final admittance to Treblinka. This drawn-out inertia, combined with the appalling conditions in the carts, led to a large number of fatalities within the carts themselves, before the deportees even arrived into the madness of Ebel's Treblinka.